Hi, I'm Beck and Food's My Life. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make one of my favourite flourless cakes, a classic orange and almond cake, coming right up. So I've been invited to an afternoon tea and we've been asked to bring a plate, and that's in a couple of days' time. So I'm planning to make my orange and almond cake because I find this cake gets really tasty after a couple of days, so it's perfect timing. Before I show you how to make the cake, I thought I may as well show you how I line my tin as well. Now, sometimes I use regular cake tins, but for the most part, I really enjoy making my cakes using a cheesecake tin or a springform cake tin. And the reason why I generally tend to use these all the time is because when it's time to turn the cake out, I just find these sorts of tins make life a little bit easier. So when it comes to lining this tin, this is how I do it. I get roughly a large square of baking paper and I put it over the base. Then I assemble my tin and that's easy, it's done. The best part about this is when it is time to turn the cake out, I'll take the ring out, I'll lift the cake up off using the paper, and that base of the tin is now separate from the cake. Nice and easy. So next is the sides of the tin. So to do this, I get a longer strip of baking paper and I cut it in half lengthways. Then I take a little dab of butter and I just do little dabs of butter all around the side of the tin so that my paper will stick to the sides. Don't need much, just enough to stick the paper. Okay, so next I just take the strips of paper and I just pop that in and push it all the way down. And then I have a little bit of space left, so I'll use my next piece. Next piece goes in to complete the circle. Okay, there, done. Now I just have to trim it up. So I'll cut off the excess of that second strip of baking paper. Don't need that now. And then I will cut off some of that top, just to keep things a little bit neater and so it fits better in the oven. And voila, there you go. That's how I line my cake tins. Okay, so the next step is you'll need to boil 2 large navel oranges in a pan of water, and once it comes to the boil, pop it down to a simmer and let these oranges simmer for about an hour. Now these have already been simmered. This morning I did that and I've let them cool, so they're really nice and soft now. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quarter these oranges and I'm going to puree them to a bit of a pulp. And I'm going to use my Ninja machine. You can use a food processor, anything really. We're just going to make sure that we get a nice thick pulp from these oranges. Skin and all, okay? So we're using every single part of the orange. Okay, so there's my beautiful orange puree that I've just scraped out of my Ninja, and that's looking lovely. Still a bit warm, so I'm going to leave it to get cool while I do the next step. So in my main bowl, I have 1 1/4 cups of caster sugar. To this, I'm going to add 5 eggs and, like every good recipe should have, 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Now I'm going to beat these 3 ingredients together until they are thick and pale. I've been beating that on a high speed for about 2.5 minutes. My mixture is definitely thick and pale, but the main thing about it now is that when I take a bit of mixture between my fingers, I can feel that the sugar has dissolved, so I know that's ready to go. The next step now is to gently fold in 3 more ingredients. So at this stage, I add my orange puree to the mix. I'm going to add 1.5 cups of almond meal, and I've sifted this. And to that, I'm also going to add 1 teaspoon of baking powder. Now I'm just going to gently fold this through. So I've given that a good mix. It's come together nicely, and now I'm ready to pour this mixture into my prepared cake tin. So in we go. Now I have preheated my oven to 170 degrees Celsius, and I'm going to bake this for about 65 minutes. When it is ready to come out of the oven, I'm going to let it cool in its tin for about 20 minutes before I even try to take it out of the cake tin. So while that's baking in the oven, I'm going to work on the sugar syrup. So the sugar syrup is going to be poured over the cake once the cake has cooled. And it's really simple. It's just half a cup of caster sugar into a small saucepan and the juice of 1 orange. Now I'm just going to pop that on the stove on a low heat just to dissolve all that sugar. Then I might turn the heat up a little bit and just let it cook until I can see that the syrup is starting to thicken. While my cake is baking, while my syrup is thickening, I've just emptied a packet of flaked almonds onto an old baking tray, and once my cake comes out, I'm going to pop these in the oven and give them a little bit of a toasting, because I'm going to use these to decorate the cake later. So my sugar has melted now. I'm going to turn up the heat to high, get some bubble action going on so that my syrup will start to thicken. And here's my bubbles. So I'm not going to stir that anymore. I'm just going to let that bubble away for about 5 minutes, and by then it should naturally be a little bit thicker. So my bubbles have subsided now that I've finished, and I'm left with this thick syrup, which is just perfect. So the cake's come out of the oven. It's been cooling for some time now, and in the end it only took 50 minutes on 170 degrees. So just watch it carefully, and you know the best way to judge is when you insert a skewer and it comes out nice and clean. So now I'm going to take my cake out of the tin carefully and put it straight onto my board. Carefully take that paper away. Okay, so I'll just slide it onto my board now. There, perfect. So remember that syrup we made earlier? We're going to use that now, and we're going to pour it over the cake so that this beautiful sweet orange syrup will be sitting in the cake and keeping it nice and moist. Now, if your syrup has become a little bit hard sitting on the bench and cooling, just stick it in the microwave for about 20 seconds and it'll come to a nice thick consistency again. Now first, before we pour, we're going to just use our skewer to poke little holes all throughout the top of the cake. So we know that syrup's going to go all the way through. Once you've done that, just spoon the syrup onto the cake. Now make sure you reserve some of that syrup, because now I'm going to use a pastry brush to brush the sides of the cake so that we can stick on some of those beautiful toasted almonds that we toasted in the oven earlier. Okay, so that syrup's going to act like glue, and now we go around the sides with our nuts. So there you go, my flourless orange and almond cake. So I've just put those almonds all the way around the sides of the cake, and I've topped it off with a few slices of orange just for a little bit of decoration. And now it's your turn. Why don't you have a go at making this stunning cake? It's especially good if you have any gluten-free friends or family. This cake is full of flavour and it's always really moist. It keeps for a few days as well, and remember, I like to make it a couple of days ahead of time so I know that all that syrup has really sunk in and the flavour is really, really good. Don't forget to check out the description box below where you'll find a link to my website. Once you're there, you'll find all my recipes, and don't forget to like the video, share the video, or better still, subscribe. I'll see you next time.